What is going on, Tentacle? My name is Billy the Squid, and today we got patch 1.04 for Elden Ring. And this is a big patch. This is a patch that, after the first patch, and we saw a bunch of buffs to sorceries and stuff, and a bunch of nerfs elsewhere, we weren't 100% sure how FromSoftware was going to handle balancing Elden Ring. And with this patch, it kind of shows their intentions with this game. And good news, everyone. That intention is to make everything overpowered so nothing is overpowered. They, instead of bringing the top tier builds down, they are doing their best to bring other builds up. And we're going to get into that as this video goes on. So starting things off, some of the more boring aspects, you now have the ability to turn on or off auto camera rotation. The only time I've ever had an issue with this is like going around, like if I'm on like a tight edge and it goes around a corner, sometimes the camera will bop off that corner automatically and send me falling to my death. I don't know if this function will be fixing that, as that seems more like a wall collision with the camera, but having the auto rotation might be helpful for some encounters. I'm thinking specifically like a Stell or some of the bosses that like run to the opposite end of the arena. You want to keep your camera focused on them while also maintaining your movement. Pretty cool. They also added some event phases for patches. I don't know what this means, but I'm assuming there's going to be more intermediary steps within his quest line to flesh out the character a little bit. So pretty cool that they're still going through with improving the characters and the NPC quest lines. That's neat. And now into the meat and potatoes, we are getting huge balancing adjustments for the biggins, the big boys, the colossal swords and weapons. They are getting buffs pretty well across the board, some more so than others, but all colossal swords and colossal weapons will have their attack speed increased and their recovery time lowered. This is specifically for ground attacks. Jumping attacks are not going to be affected. On top of this, they also are having their two-handed attack damage buffed across the board. Jump attacks, again, not included. This is great. I feel like with the Colossal Weapons pre-patch, the biggest thing that people were doing was just abusing the jumping R1s or R2s because it didn't feel like it was worth it to use the ground attacks. It left you just as vulnerable as doing a jumping attack, and you got so much more benefit out of the jumping attack. So now you actually have some give and take. Hey, do I want to go with a faster, slightly less damaging attack, but it's going to allow me to dodge more properly? Or do I have an opportunity to actually go in for one of these jumping attacks instead of you kind of being pigeonholed into exclusively using jump attacks? Very, very good. They also increased the block rate and guard boost for these kinds of weapons, as well as regular great swords, great hammers, great axes, great spears, and halberds. So the bigger the weapon now, the more you're going to get if you weapon block with them. I think this is trying to incentivize using guard counters a little bit more, and like since these weapons are so heavy on their own, you're not going to be having a shield with them typically. So I think they're trying to incentivize that play a little bit and maybe give a little bit more defensive option to people that are investing in these heavier builds. Lastly, for the big boys, the Grafted Blade Greatsword and the Devourer's Scepter are getting special treatment in a even more increased damage from whatever the base that they are already buffing the weapon classes as. So that's pretty cool. Another thing the community was looking to see if this was going to be affected, because it's been running rampant in invasions and PvP, is Madness. How is Madness going to be affected? And they have nerfed it across the board from what it looks like. First off, they have nerfed the status effect buildup using the Albinaric Staff and the Dragon Communion Seal. I know the Dragon Communion Seal was being heavily abused with its arcane scaling. You could just pump arcane into that, have your madness spells, and basically be able to like stun lock people in madness. So that is going down. On top of that, they have also shortened the length of the Maddest Affliction animation, so you're not going to be holding your eyes trying to gouge them out quite as long as you were before. Again, giving you more opportunity to break out of a stun lock. I'm assuming stun locks are going to be nigh impossible at this state in the game. But to counter this, since people are going to be getting out of the madness animation a little bit faster, they have also lowered the speed of madness build-up recovery. So you are going to stay in your like pre-madness state a little bit longer. It's going to take longer for that to drain down than what it was before. So a good ebb and flow to this buff and nerf. And while we're talking about madness and stuff, might as well bring up the nerfs to specific spells. The Flame of Frenzy has a decrease in madness buildup on enemies, as does Frenzied Burst. Frenzied Burst was the railgun type move that if you got hit by one of them, they could just chain you over and over and there was nothing you could do about it. Both of these spells have seen reductions, and I think rightfully so, although I think Flame of Frenzy might be a little bit of collateral damage. We'll see how it does. Last thing worth bringing up is Great Shield Talisman is going to be reduced for weapons with already high natural block rate, just making it so that you can't stack them and become an immovable fortress. And probably the most important thing to come out of this patch, and something that people might overlook, is that FP and stamina growth rates at lower levels have been increased. So you are going to be getting more natural FP and stamina from levels than you were before this patch. To get this benefit, though, you have to do a few things. You either need to level up, activate Godric's Great Rune, re-equip any armor or talisman that gives you a bonus to strength, dexterity, vigor, or endurance, intelligence, faith, or arcane. So I highly recommend, if you've got any of the source heals, just turning that on, turning it off, and you will be good to go. And now we get into the fun part of the video, the thing that has me the most excited, the buffs and nerfs section. And they have them labeled as upward adjustments and downward adjustments. Upward being buffs, downward being nerfs. And let me tell you, there is so much buffing going on. And I shit you not. 3 out of the spells, we have probably 30 plus buffs, 3 nerfs. And I've already talked about 2 of them. As far as the weapons go, we have probably about the same 30 some buffs and 0 nerfs. This is amazing. FromSoftware, you are doing me very, very happy with this philosophy. Make everything viable so that you don't need to be scaling things down. This is the way you keep the fun in the game. Bravo on that. And let's get into the specifics on what is being buffed. So believe it or not, some of the sorceries is if sorcery builds weren't strong enough already, they are bringing the other spells that are kind of lackluster up into line, specifically Crystal Barrage, Gavel of Haima, Shatter Earth, Rock Blaster, Thop's Barrier, Ronala's Full Moon, and Rani's Dark Moon, as well as the Carrion Greatsword. All of these spells are getting buffs, most of them in the form of increased cast speed and decreased recovery time, so that you're not locked into the animations as long. Some of them have also gotten an area of effect increase. All of these are extremely, extremely good things. One thing I will say is that the Shatter Earth and Rock Blaster are now getting hyper armor through their animations, so you're not going to be able to get knocked out of those animations as easy, making them a little bit more viable for boss fights as well as PvP. And now for some of the more off-color sorceries that you can get from the game. Magma Shot, Roiling Magma, Gelmir's Fury, Rykard's Rancor, Oracle Bubbles, Great Oracular Bubble, Briar of Sin, Briar of Punishment, Explosive Ghost Flame, Tibia's Summons, all buffs across the board. We're seeing, again, a lot of increased cast speed and decreased recovery times, making these spells a little bit more faster and fluid to use. We're also seeing some decreased FP costs with some of these spells. Magma Shot, Rykard's Rancor, Explosive Ghost Flames, to be a few. And then with Briar of Sin and Briar of Punishment, we are getting a little bit of blood loss buildup. I've tried these spells, and I was disappointed by them. I'm going to be going back and trying these spells again, just because I do think all they needed was just a little bit of tweaking to their blood loss to make them more viable, because the damage isn't supposed to come from the spell, it's supposed to come from the bleed out, and I think this is a very good buff. One interesting one is Gelmir's Fury. They're going to kind of take the shotgun buff approach and tighten up the spread, so it's going to be less random in the nature of the projectiles. And also the lava pools are going to do more damage and have a bigger hitbox. Very, very good things there. And now we get into the Incantations, the spell class that probably needed the most work, and they are going a long way to making this class just a little bit more viable than what it was. Actually, it's quite a bit more viable than what it was. We are seeing decreased FP costs, decreased stamina costs, increased cast speeds, and decreased recovery times pretty well across the board for a multitude of different incantation types, whether it be the aspects of the Crucible spells with Tail and Horn both getting massive buffs. Horn specifically getting an interesting one where the travel distance of your thrust is going to be farther on non-charged up spells, and it's also going to make enemies flinch more often whenever you do charge it. So instead of you charging for the distance, you're going to be charging for a stagger effect. I think that is really, really cool. Elden Stars and Blackblade are both getting a little bit faster with decreased recovery time and increased cast speed, as well as Blackblade having reduced stamina consumption. The trio of Ring of Light spells are all getting buffs across the board. Discus of Light, Triple Ring of Light, and Radagon's Ring of Light are all getting buffs. All of them are getting their damage increased. Discus of Light and Radagon's Ring of Light are getting their cast speeds increased, as well as Radagon's Ring of Light getting a decreased recovery time. And Discus of Light and Radagon's Ring of Light are also getting FP cost reductions. As somebody who's a big fan of the Way of the White Corona from Dark Souls 3, it makes me happy that the little Discus boys are getting their time in the sun once again. And it seems like lightning has struck for the lightning spell variants in the incantations category. Lightning Stake, Honed Bolt, Ancient Dragon's Lightning Spear, Ancient Dragon's Lightning Stake, Lanciax's Glaive, Fortisax's Lightning Spear, Frozen Lightning Spear are all getting huge buffs. Some of them are in the form of stamina reduction, some of them are getting FP and stamina costs reduced, others are getting recovery time reduced, others are getting cast speed increased. This is just good buffs all the way across the board. They're also adding some hyper armor to some of the animations that take a little bit longer, such as Lanciax's Glaive, Fortisax's Lightning Spear, and the Frozen Lightning Spear, to name a few. Death Lightning is getting a really interesting one. They're decreasing the FP cost, and they're also making it so the Death Smoke sticks around a little bit longer so that you're more likely to get those instant death procs. Pretty cool. And don't worry, FromSoftware didn't forget you spicy fire boys. O Flame, Giant's Flame take the Flame of the Fell God, Whirl O Flame, Burn O Flame, Black Flame, Scouring Black Flame, and Black Flame Ritual are all getting buffs across the board, whether it is reduced FP costs, increased damage, increased attack speeds, more of the same from what we've been seeing earlier, but buffs across the board nonetheless. Some of the more interesting ones are Black Flame is now going to break enemy posture and guard a little bit easier. Scouring Black Flame has had its attack range increased and its area of effect increased. That's pretty cool. I don't know how many times I tried to use that spell and things like it looked like the animation hit something and it just didn't. So this is going to be a very welcome buff to that. Beastie Boys, you didn't get too much from this patch, but Garonk's Beast Claw is going to have its damage increased and decreased recovery time, so you at least have that to look forward to. Blood builds are getting a little bit of a buff, specifically the Blood Flame builds. Blood Flame Talons and Blood Boon are both getting buffs, with Blood Flame Talons getting decreased FP costs, and Blood Boon getting increased damage and cast speed. Both of these are also getting decreased recovery times. Pest Threads is getting its stamina cost reduced, so you can spam it just a little bit more, just like those fucking centipedes do in the mines. The legendary Scarlet Aeonia is getting its cast speed increased and its recovery time decreased, and you are also getting hyper armor while this spell is casting. A wonderful buff for a wonderful spell. If in nothing else, spectacle. We are getting a few buffs to the Frenzy spells. Unendurable Frenzy and Inescapable Frenzy are both getting buffs, with their attack speeds going up. Unendurable Frenzy is also getting decreased recovery time, and it's bringing in the shotgun spread of the projectiles so that you're going to be more consistently able to figure out the appropriate distance and home in on the people that you want to hit madness on. It's also getting a little bit of a madness build-up increase, which I think is interesting. And lastly, the Dragon's Communion. We didn't get as many buffs as I was expecting from the Dragon's Communion. I feel like these are fairly weak overall, but we did get a few buffs in the form of Placidusax's Ruin, Dragonclaw, Dragon Maw, and Greyol's Roar. All of these are getting decreased FP costs, stamina costs, and their recovery times being brought down. In the form of Dragonclaw and Dragon Maw as well, they have increased the stagger whenever you use the charged up variants of these spells. So again, just like with the Crucible spells, these, the more you charge them, the more stagger they are going to do. Some side grades, we have Adula's Moonblade, Flame Fall Upon Thee, and Howl of Shabrira. They're getting a little bit of buff, a little bit of nerf. In the form of the Moonblade, they are decreasing the power of a single cast, but making it so that it is more easy to hit consistent repeat shots continuously. They are also increasing the cast speed and lowering the dexterity requirements for it to be able to be cast fast, which I find that very interesting, that they felt it wasn't benefiting at lower dexterity levels, but it is fine at higher. So yeah, at lower dexterity, you're going to be casting a little bit faster. Flame Fall Upon Thee is making it so that the damage of a single cast is lower, but it is now going to be more likely to hit an enemy multiple times. Also, the FP cost is going down. And with Howl of Shabriri, decrease the madness buildup on enemies, but it is now going to be faster to come out. And then for the nerfs, we've already talked about two of them with the Flame of Frenzy and Frenzied Burst, but Swarm of Flies was the other nerf that came out of this patch. They're just decreasing the blood loss buildup. A lot of people think that this is to protect the one and only Millennia from the Swarm of Flies that have been plaguing her in her boss fight. I don't believe that is the case. I think this is specifically a PvP-centered nerf. It was pretty well instantly bleeding people out whenever they got hit by it. And it's just not a very fun spell to go against in PvP. It's slow moving. It pretty well disengages the fight altogether. So, interesting nerf. I'm for it. And now for the speed round. We are going to be going through all of the weapon skills from the Ashes of War and seeing how quickly we can get through this massive list of buffs. Let's begin. Lion's Claw, increased cast speed and decreased recovery time. Kick, increased cast speed. Horlu, Earthshaker, increased cast speed and increased cast speed from follow-up attacks. Decreased recovery time. Troll's Roar, decreased stamina cost. Increased cast speed from follow-up inputs and increased distance traveled. Giant's Hunt and Storm Assault both get decreased recovery time. Carrying Greatsword and Carrying Grandeur, increased cast speed, decreased recovery time. Also increased damage when charged. Charged attacks will also cause enemies to flinch more. Gravitas, increased cast speed. Flame Strike, increased the distance traveled from the strong attack. One of my personal favorite buffs of this, Black Flame Tornado, added a hitbox to the weapon spinning and added a window to roll during the attack to cancel the animation. So you're not going to be locked into the spin animation if somebody gets out of that and you're not just going to be a sitting duck. Also, the fact that the weapon is going to have its own hitbox is going to make it so that on bigger bosses, if you point blank spin on them, they are going to take huge damage. I think this is going to be a very, very good boss killing weapon art. Back to the buffs though, Lightning Slash, Sacred Blade, Sacred Rings of Light, and Poisonous Mist, all getting increased cast speed. Lightning Slash is also getting a hitbox on the stomp animation, so pretty cool there. Poison Moth Flight is getting increased cast speed and decreased recovery time. Ice Spear is getting a hitbox on the weapon spinning animation. Increased cast speed's also going to Chilling Mist, Assassin's Gambit, and Shield Bash. Shield Crash and Blades of Gold getting decreased stamina cost, increased cast speed, and then for Blades of Gold, you're getting a decreased recovery time, as well as Blade of Death getting the cast speed and decreased recovery time. Golden Tempering is getting decreased FP cost, increased cast speed, and the effect will last longer. Last Rites and Mists of Slumber are getting cast speed increases. Eocade's Dancing Blade, you're going to travel further with the attacks, and added a window to roll during the animation to cancel it. Unblockable Blade is getting a specific coded sword buff where the cast speed with the coded sword is going to be faster. Alabaster Lord's Pull increased cast speed and decreased recovery time and added a cancel window to dodge roll out. Established Order decreased recovery time and increased cast speed on follow-up inputs, increased the damage, and made it easier for enemies to flinch from the attack. Moonlight Greatsword and Wave of Gold are getting decreased FP costs, increased cast speeds, and decreased recovery time. Moonlight Greatsword is also getting increased frost build-up effect. Wolf's Assault, cast speed, and recovery time. The Queen's Black Flame is getting cast speed and also getting a cancel out. Decreased stamina costs from Dynast's Finesse and Flowing Form. Death Flare is getting increased cast speed. Onyx Lord's Repulsion is getting increased cast speed and decreased recovery time, as well as a window to cancel out of the attack. Magma Guillotine getting the stamina cost reduction, increased cast speed, and decreased recovery time from follow-up inputs. Cursed Blood Slice, increased cast speed, decreased recovery time. Ice Lightning Sword, increased cast speed, and a hitbox on the stomp. Rose's Summons is having its recovery time reduced. I Command Thee Kneel is getting an increased cast speed on follow-up inputs and also allowing you to roll out to cancel the animation. Goldbreaker is getting decreased FP cost, increased cast speed, and decreased recovery time. Familial Rancor is getting the cancel out option during the animation. Bastard Star's Nebula is getting increased cast speed and decreased recovery time. Increased cast speed is going to Regal Beast Claws and Devour the Worlds. Decreased recovery time is going to Regal Roar and Spear Call Ritual. Ancient Lightning Spear is getting decreased FP cost and increased cast speed, also giving this attack hyper armor. The Great Serpent Hunt is getting decreased recovery time and increased damage and allows players to more easily withstand attacks from enemies, so more hyper armor. GG Rykard. Frenzy Flame Thrust is getting decreased FP cost and decreased recovery time, but is also getting decreased madness on self buildup, so you're not going to be madnessing yourself quite as much. Bloodboon Ritual and Mikola's Ring of Light are getting increased cast speed. Sea of Magma is getting cast speed and recovery time increases, as well as being able to cancel out of the animation. Flame Dance is getting stamina cost reduced, decreased recovery time, and the ability to cancel out of the animation. Storm Kick is getting decreased stamina costs, and last but not least, Bear Witness is getting increased cast speed. The only side grade we're getting is Thundercloud Form is getting decreased damage whenever you just push the button once. You need to hold it to get better damage. They're reducing the FP cost and also increasing the cast speed and decreasing the recovery time. And that's pretty well it. There's a few bug fixes, but none of them are really of note. There weren't a lot of exploits going around currently after the last patch. A few things to note are they have made it so that any hacked-in items cannot be dropped and left for players. They've made it so Millicent has a protective barrier after helping her at the Halig Tree. And they've also made a bunch of changes to multiplayer so that hopefully the multiplayer stability, specifically on PC, will be improved, both in the online multiplayer stability in and of itself, and some of the bugs that were happening, such as Renala's gimmick in Phase 1 not working if you were in a multiplayer setting. But yeah, that's it. The link to the patch notes will be down below if you want to go and read through them after I am done here. But we'll be back with more Elden Ring content in the future, so like the video if you found it helpful, subscribe for more Elden Ring content, and until next time, Tenna Crew, much love. Bye-bye.